Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. Today's episode is one that I'm kind of surprised I haven't gotten to yet, being that this is such a well-known big American craft beer brand, one of the original brewers that really helped push and start the American craft beer movement. That is Boston Beer Company, Sam Adams label. This is their summer sampler pack review. All of these are beers I have had before, but I'm really curious to really get in and dig in and give them a proper rating and really dive in and think about what they all have to offer. For the sampler this time, it's all really great beers that do go well in summer. These are all beers I would go for on a hot summer's day to quench my thirst and still enjoy some delicious craft beer. So first we have the Boston Lager. This is the classic quintessential Sam Adams. This is a Vienna style lager. That's 5% ABV. Second is their summer ale. This is a citrus wheat pale ale. Clocks in at 5.3% ABV. The next one is a newer beer that they've put out fairly recently. This is the Sam 76. This is actually a light beer they've made. So they have two now. There's Sam Adams Light and the Sam 76. So this is a light lager, 4.7% ABV on this one. Then finally, one of my personal favorite beers that Sam makes is their Porch Rocker. This is a Radler or Shandy if you prefer. I prefer Radler. We'll get into the history of that style when I get into this beer for the review. 4.5% ABV on this one. So these are all really, really great summertime beers. Really well put together sampler pack from Boston Beer Company here. We'll jump right in, starting with the classic Boston Lager. Again, a Vienna style lager on this one. Okay, so the very first beer that we're going to review out of the four in this Sam Adams Boston Beer Company summer sampler pack is the quintessential Sam beer, the Boston Lager, 5% ABV. This is a Vienna style lager. This is kind of the beer that everybody has first from the Sam Adams label. It was certainly the first I had, and this is such a well done representation of the Vienna lager style in my opinion. It's still one of my go-tos. I'm actually always very, very pleased when I get a Sam Adams sampler pack because they always have their flagship beer in there, and this is always a good choice. It goes great with pretty much any occasion I could think of. Also wholly appropriate, I've got one of my Sam Adams glasses here. Figure we're doing Sam, let's put it in the Sam glassware. I did mention this in one of my prior videos as I used this glass on a different review series. This is a very good all-purpose glass. As you can probably tell, it's got a narrow bottom and it's got a slight bulb which will capture and trap and push up aromas, and then it has another subtle taper. So you can do a lot of different beer styles in this glass, including more complex beers you would pour in a goblet like Russian Imperial Stout or say Belgian Trappist Ale. This glass would still be appropriate for that, even though it's not on a standard stem in a goblet form. It's got the same shape. It's kind of that tulip effect, which is what you want. So this works for pretty much all beer styles. This is a good de facto craft beer glass if you get these. They sell them on their website. You can find them in stores as well, I believe. I don't remember where I got these. Maybe Target many years ago. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this poured. As always, I'm not an expert beer pourer. I will do my best to pour it into the glass well and just monitor how agitated it's getting as I'm pouring it. Actually, this is a decent pour, so I will be able to follow nearly the halfway rule to agitate up. Yeah, I could have been actually a bit more brisk in my agitation. So this actually does form a much better head. I just poured it not particularly well. Got a very light head on there, but it does form a nice, relatively tight bubbled, creamy head on top. Very, very effervescent. Don't know if the camera's picking that up or not, but just bubbles going insane all in there. Nice light. You take a sniff, and the immediate profile on the nose that I get, it actually reminds me of the aroma of a Czech or a German style Pilsner. Even though this is a Vienna lager, Vienna being Austria, city in Austria, or Österreich if you prefer for the German speakers in my audience. This is a classic Viennese style lager, which is a little bit lighter, but it does have a hoppy character to it. So they call it a Vienna lager. It could almost be a Vienna Pils. It's modeled after the same style. So we'll get in. We're just gonna get a sip in here, though you can notice, obviously, even looking at the camera, this has a much more amber color than, say, a Czech or German Pilsner, which is kind of a trademark here. It's got more roasty malts in it, which does add a little more depth and a little more character without the hops having to ride through quite as intensely. So let's go ahead and give this a sip. See what the old Sam Adams Boston Lager is about. It's just good beer. Every time I have a Boston Lager, I always think the same thing. You know, this may be one of the oldest, most well-known American craft beers that there is in the country, but you know what? It's stood the test of time, and it's been around, and it got popular for a very, very, very good reason. This is quality beer. It absolutely is. You get a ton of flavor. It's super clean, super crisp, and it's got an excellent balance of malt to hop. The ratios that they have are insanely well balanced. This is such a great representation of the style. The nose, again, it matches perfectly with what you actually get in your palate and on your palate once you finally get it in your mouth. Yeah, there's just a very nice malty character to it. It's not on the edge of sweet. It's not a sweet beer, but you do get these nice caramelly roasted malt notes, and then just kind of the subtle hop astringent bitterness that rides in the back. And it's not a West Coast IPA style. It's not the big piney resinous hops. This is much more like German noble hops, like you'd find in a German or Czech Pilsner, or maybe even slightly akin to classic Fuggle or something like that you'd find in an English special bitter. It's got those earthier hop profiles, which just pairs so well with this malt bill and helps balance it out, because it's not in your face bitter, but it's enough that's in there that you can taste it, and it just goes perfectly and balances the malts. I mean, this is, for my money, one of the best balanced beers I could think of. And it may be just a boring old Boston lager that's everywhere and everybody's had, but I think if you really sit down and critique what it is you're experiencing, that you'll come back to where you were probably the first time you ever had it. And yeah, you know what? This really is good beer. There's a reason it's been around. There's a reason it's so popular. It's because it's excellent. This is just well done. Thinking on the body and the mouthfeel. The body is actually medium. It's got a very nice body. It's medium. The mouthfeel is very silky. I wouldn't say it's viscous, but it's not flat either. It does stick and really lets the hops and the malt bill linger in your mouth, so you get to think on it and keep thinking as it has this nice long finish. It is a pretty good long finish. I'd say on each sip, at least a good 20 seconds, I'm still able to taste a perfect balance of malt and hops. This is just good beer. It just is. We'll come back at the end and give it the full rating, but for now, let's go ahead and move on to our next beer, which is the Summer Ale. That's the Citrus Wheat Pale Ale. Okay, so for our second beer of the review here, we're moving on to the Summer Ale. Again, this is a Citrus Wheat Pale Ale. This one clocks in at 5.3%. This is one I've had, and it's a good beer. It's a really good summer beer. It's very refreshing. Has a lot of citrus in it, orange and lemon. And in fact, I'll see if I'll tell you exactly their description on the back. Yeah, orange, lemon, and lime peels. And it's got grains of paradise, and that they mix in with the wheat for the malt bill. So yeah, this is a really good classic summer beer. Wheat beers like any of your Hefeweizens and any of those, be they German, be they Belgian, all those styles of beers, the wheat beers in particular, and they tend to have that kind of clovey bite, and sometimes you'll see them garnished with an orange or a lemon slice or something like that. Those are really good, refreshing beers on a hot day. This one is Sam Adams' kind of take on the same style, so they call it a citrus wheat pale ale. So we'll get it in here, poured in the glass. Gonna be a little more rough down the middle. There we go. That's a much better head than I poured on the Boston Lager. All right, so out of the gate, I can see it's a really nice classic light golden color. It's got a little bit of a haze to it, which you would expect from the wheat. Give it a sniff. You can smell that citrus quite clearly, though I can tell you, unlike Hefeweizens, this has no hint of a clove aroma at all on the palate, and indeed I don't believe it's brewed at all with Hefeweizen yeast, because I've had it before and there's not a hint of clove in it at all. So this is just a much lighter citrusy, but it's got that same malt bill. It's just different yeast strain, but a very similar to, say, a classic Hefeweizen. So let's jump right in. Yeah, gosh, that just smells so refreshing. That citrus, it's so bright. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The description they have on the back of the label here, where they kind of give you a little hint of what they put in there in their bill, it's spot on. You can definitely taste the citrus. The lemon and the orange come through quite strongly. Not really picking up the lime. I think the orange and the lemon overshadow it a little bit, but you can definitely taste the citrus. It's very citrus forward. And really on top, the malt bill that they have in there makes a nice clean, it's got a rather dry finish to it. It's got a nice clean malt bill. Nothing's overpowering. Again, this is another well-balanced beer. This for me, super smooth. This is one of these classic hot summer day beers. It's kind of got some crusty, toasty notes on the end of the finish from the malt, but you still very heavily, I'd say it's about 65-35, the citrus that comes through compared to the what seems like a relatively small amount of hops. There's not pungent in your face. There's no notable hop character to it. They're in there, but it's not hop forward. You get just the hint of bitters that they put in the background, you know, to balance out the beer, but it's very citrus forward, and kind of lets the balance of the citrus additives and the malt bill that they chose kind of be the star of this beer. And what it creates is a very clean, refreshing, very clean, refreshing beer. You know, especially considering what they were kind of going for with their wheat pale ale. I'd say it's a pretty good indication. Though, in general, a pale ale is going to be a bit more bitter. It's going to be a bit more hop forward, but this is not quite like that. This is very citrus forward. It really, it's kind of, in a sense, it's a little simple in that take that forget the hops. They're in there just as the preservative and the base beer ingredient additive, but they're very, very much in the background. Just enough to let you know you're drinking a beer and not drinking lemonade. But it's fantastic. This is a really, really good beer. For the body and the mouthfeel, this is a thinner beer. Yeah, I'd say it's a very medium light body. The mouthfeel is It's only a little bit thicker than, say, the viscosity of normal water. Maybe it's akin to a fruit juice. It's very clean. It's very light, which is one of the reasons I think that this beer excels for what it's trying to do and bills itself and names itself a summer ale. This is absolutely an ale that I would happily enjoy in the summer. It's very, very good. I could see myself getting done cutting the grass and you just want a beer to quench your thirst when you're done. This would be a go-to. This is very, very good beer. It's very nice. It's very refreshing. We'll come back, get the final rating in all categories at the end. For now, let's go ahead and move on to our next one, which is the Sam 76. This is one of their newer beers. It's a light lager, so not the same as their Sam Light. It's a totally different light beer for them. We'll move on and get to that one next. Okay, so for our next beer, we're moving on to the Sam 76. This is a newer beer that they put out. It's one of only two light beers that they have out I know of. The standard Sam Adams Light that's been out for years, and now this Sam 76, which is quite a bit different. This clocks in at 4.7% ABV. So let's go ahead and get this one poured into the glass. Right away, you can see just how much lighter in color this beer is compared to the normal Sam offerings. This looks very akin to a big box American non-craft light beer, or maybe a bit like a German Hefeweizen, but we know it is a light lager, and that is a beautiful golden color. It's very pale. It's got a light, very tight bubble, slightly creamy head on it. Smells very light, slight hint of fruit, but not overtly fruity. Don't really pick up any hops in it at all, but it smells very light and it smells like it's going to be refreshing. So without further ado, down the hatch. Okay, this beer is not even remotely like Sam Adams Light. That to me tastes rather like a light version of their Boston Lager. This is nothing like that. This almost tastes to me like Boston Beer Company set out to make a craft version of American big box light beer. And if that was indeed their ultimate goal, I would have to say that their experiment was a resounding success. This reminds me of the spirit of classic big box American beer, which, to be fair, we're talking hundreds of years ago when all of the big ones first came into being. They were modeled on a classic German and Belgian and Czech Pilsner style beers. And over the years, they just got watered down and used more adjuncts, et cetera, and thus we are today. But this tastes very much like their craft interpretation of the classic American big box beer. It's just got so much more going for it. There's no off flavors. You can tell this is pure malt and it tastes like it. And it's very fine, very light roasted. The body is super light. The mouthfeel, again, I mean, it's basically water mouthfeel. So that's what they're going for. That's not a knock on this. That's the style here. Finish is super clean, super smooth, no funky flavors. Yeah, it's just very nice and clean. Slight fruitiness on the back. It's not citrusy and it's not sweet, but you do get a little bit of that impression on the end. But overall, it's a nice, clean, smooth beer. Doesn't have a super long finish. What you do get is just nice, clean, roasted malt in there. This is a very well done beer for this style. It's very well balanced. It looks great. Honestly, I'm a fan. This would be another that I would classify as a perfect hot summer day beer. Get done doing yard work and come back and grab these and you could throw these back. This is ridiculously smooth and it's very light. So it doesn't give you a super full kind of feeling like, oh wow, this beer is so syrupy and heavy. You know, it's you could have a few of these probably no problem. And a lower ABV, not the end of the world. I like it. I'm a fan. I'm gonna come back and get the full rating, but my initial impression is I definitely approve of this. This is a good beer to have in the marketplace. Well done, Sam. Okay, so for our final beer in the Sam Adams Summer Sampler Pack review, we move on to the Porch Rocker, which is a Radler or Shandy if you prefer. I prefer Radler. This one clocks in at 4.5% ABV. It's a very interesting style, and it is definitely German in its genesis. The history of the Radler is that German cyclists that were in races in Germany, as they were in between legs or completing their race, being German, naturally they wanted to quench their thirst with beer. So somebody came up with the idea that mixing beer and lemonade might be a little more thirst quenching, being that it's lemonade mixed with beer. So they're still able to get their beer, but they mix lemonade with it, and it was historically done in equal parts, 50-50 beer and lemonade, and thus the Radler was born. The name Radler comes from the root word from the German for bicycle, which is Rad, das Rad. And to ride a bicycle is Radfahren. And a person who rides a bicycle is a Radfahrer. So Radler comes from the root for bicycle in German, which is Rad. So a little interesting bit of history. It's a very unique style of beer and one that I happen to be a massive fan of. These are hard to find, so that a big American craft brewer like Boston Beer Company is putting out a Radler. This is actually big news for me. These are not easy to find, even in a place like Total Wine that has literally thousands of beers. You really have to dig deep. There are some very well-known German ones. I've had several that are unbelievably good. And the last several times I've been to Total Wine, in fact, I can't even find them there anymore. I don't know if it's an importer issue or whatnot, but really interesting and unique style of beer. Perfect for summer, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and get this poured in the glass. Yeah, as I'm pouring, you can see it's a nice light yellow, as you might expect. And I'm actually just going to read from the back of the Sam label to see what their take is on the classic Radler style. Beer mixed with lemonade. Theirs, they brew with Golden Helles Lager. Okay, that's the base, is a Helles, and they combine with lemonade, literally. So they take the same approach. They use the classic German approach. Beer plus lemonade. And you can see it's very light, very effervescent. Got a slight amberish hue to it, but it's mostly pale yellow. Ah, and you give it a sniff and you just know you're in for a treat. I can't describe how good the nose is on this beer. It is fantastic. It smells so bright and lemony and really does smell strongly of lemonade. That is what comes through. You just get a hint of the fact that there's beer in there, but the lemon really comes through strongly. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a sip of this one. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I wish you could taste this if you've never had it or this style of beer. It's so unique. It's such a fun beer style. The Helles is there. You can get it. It's in the back, and it finishes with a nice classic Helles malt profile and finish. But the lemonade balance in here, I mean, it's almost perfect 50-50. It is lemonade beer. That's the best way I can describe it. It is just so good. It's insane. If you're a fan of lemonade and you're a fan of the German Helles beer, you'll probably really enjoy the Porch Rocker. This beer screams hot summer day. Oh man, I could just throw these back. That is so, so good. I've been in the kitchen cooking, so that's quenching my thirst too. Been in there getting all hot, but man, such a good beer. It's so clean, it's so refreshing, the body is so light, the mouthfeel is super smooth, and it's just a wonderful mix of beer and lemonade. I highly, highly recommend this style. If you've never tried it, it is going to blow your mind how interesting a style this is. I'll come back at the full review here, and then we'll go through the full shebang, top to bottom here at the end, and hit them from A to B. We started with the Boston Lager, moved on to the Summer Ale. Lastly, we did Sam 76 and finish it up here with the Porch Rocker. So we'll come back and get the full scores. Okay, so now for the ratings of the Sam Adams Summer Sampler Pack. Started with the Boston Lager, Vienna style lager. This is a 5% ABV. I gave the aroma on this one a 7 out of 10, above average. Taste same, 7 out of 10, above average. 8 for the body. This was excellent. The body is so nice on that beer. Same for the mouthfeel. I gave that one an 8. The finish on this is really nice. It's a very, very long, especially for the style. I gave that also an 8 out of 10. Head and retention on this, really, really good example. 8 out of 10. Very, very close to what you're looking for in this style. It's the best way I could think to put it. It's really nice head. If you pour it well, that's the operative word. And again, I do not profess to be an expert, but the appearance, I gave it a 9 out of 10. I only docked it a little bit because it was a little bit more ambery than you expect from a Vienna style lager, but still very, very close. The balance on this is great. 9 out of 10 for the balance. Feeling in the intangible, same thing, 9 out of 10. And finally, as an example of the style, 9 out of 10. That brings the final score to 82 for the classic Boston Lager. Again, just to reiterate, I've mentioned this in a few episodes, but when I'm rating beers, I am really thinking about the style. Not every beer is supposed to have a big, bold body or a thick, viscous mouthfeel or have a really big head. So these ratings are all taking into consideration the style of beer that the brewer is brewing. So in case you're ever wondering, that's my point and center, and I try to stick true to it. Moving on to the Summer Ale. This is their Citrus Sweet Pale Ale. This one's a 5.3% ABV. For the aroma, I really love it. You knew it was going to be good out of the gate. It was so bright and citrusy and floral. 8 out of 10 there. Taste, I gave it a 7 out of 10, above average. Same for the body, 7 out of 10. The mouthfeel wasn't quite up to snuff what I expect from a pale ale or a wheat-based beer, so I give it a 6 there. High end of average, though. The finish was nice, 7 out of 10, above average. The head and the retention, I expect the head to form a little better and for it to retain a little better than it did in this style. And I've poured a few others and been a little more heavy-handed and whatnot. It just doesn't hold that well in the Sam Summer Ale, but 6 out of 10, still high end of average. The appearance, I gave it an 8 out of 10. This was a beautiful citrus wheat pale ale. Kind of fit the balance between a classic wheat beer and a pale ale in appearance, so definitely high marks there. Balance 8 out of 10. The feeling in the intangible, I also gave it an 8 out of 10. And finally, as an example of the style, I gave that a 7 out of 10. Really good beer, really nice. This is another, I mean, these are all great summer beers, but this is the one with the added fruit in there. It just really hits home. And being a pale ale back, but placed with some wheat, it made for a really interesting, unique beer. I enjoyed it. So 72 out of 100 for the Summer Ale. Moving on to Sam 76, their newest light beer. It's a light lager, 4.7% ABV. I really enjoyed what this beer was doing, and I really appreciate what Sam did bringing this to the market. This, to me, at least seems like their take on a classic American light big box beer. Only they brewed it properly with no adjuncts, and they brewed it with quality ingredients and clearly with some love, and that makes all the difference in the world. Aroma, I gave it a 7 out of 10. It was better than your average American light lager, but you know, it is what it is. Light lagers, they're not going to be overwhelmingly heavy on the nose, but it was nice. You knew it was there. Taste, actually, I give it a 6 out of 10. It's on the high end of average, but you know, for a light lager, even though it was craft, it could have had just a little more pungent taste. And I realize that probably comes down to the balance of the malts, and it starts kicking the ABV up a little higher, and then you can't really call it light, but still a great attempt. The body, wonderful for a light lager, 8 out of 10. Same thing for the mouthfeel, 8 out of 10. Finish, I gave it a 7. It was longer than I anticipated. it really lets you sink your teeth into what you were tasting there. And yeah, that's a nice interpretation on the style. I gave it a 7 out of 10. The head retention, actually, this is the low category for me on this one. And I poured identically, I poured more gently, and I poured a classic, in, and then much more vigor, and it just doesn't hold the head in this beer. I gave it a 4 out of 10 because it does form one. It's not completely flat, but I expected it to be a bit more foamy and to hold in there a little longer for an American light lager. Finally, appearance for the appearance, it's a 10 out of 10. It was beautiful, lovely light lager that was textbook. Balance, I gave it a 9. Exceptionally well balanced light lager. Again, I keep coming back to what they're doing with this beer, at least what I believe they're trying to do with it. And bravo Boston Beer Company. I get it. 9 out of 10 for the balance. Feeling intangible, 8 out of 10. Finally, as an example of this style, I had to give it top marks, 10 out of 10. I really, really like where Sam's going with this. Don't know if they're going to add some additional light beers into the mix, into their portfolio, but this was a really strong offering, especially considering the category I think it's targeted after. I really enjoyed it. I really did. I gave this a 77 out of 100, which is well on the high end of average, getting in an exceptionally well above average. Finally, moving on to the Porch Rocker. This is the Radler, 4.5%. I realized as soon as I finished my cut, I said that das deutsches Wort für auf English for a bicycle is Rad. That is incorrect. It is das Fahrrad. Das Fahrrad. It's been a few years. You don't speak it every day. You have to think on it. And I realized immediately after I ended the cut. No, I said das Rad. Incorrect. Das Fahrrad. Moving on. Aroma absolutely blew me away. It does every time. Radlers are great beers. And you can really smell them. You really can. They have a very strong nose. 10 out of 10. Perfect score there. Taste on this one, this is such a great example of a Radler, although it's brewed in America and that's a classic German style. I gave it an 8 out of 10. The body on this was almost textbook for a Radler, 9 out of 10. Same thing for the mouthfeel, 9 out of 10. The finish on this, it's nice and long, not quite as complex and long as some Radlers I've had, and it's a different take and different interpretation on the style, but still I gave it an 8 out of 10 for the finish. Head and retention, this is another one similar to the Sam 76. I poured this multiple different ways, just a trial and error in the same glassware, made sure it was nice and clean, and I just couldn't get the classic head profile that you'd expect from a Radler. It shouldn't be big, but it shouldn't be devoid of a head either, and it shouldn't be gone in 10 seconds. So just average there, 5 out of 10. The appearance, this was lovely. A little darker than your classic Radler, but not by much. I give it an 8 out of 10, well above average. Balance, almost perfect, 9 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, my subjective category, I gave it a 10 out of 10. I love the style of beer, and I love Sam Adams' interpretation of it. I think it's fantastic. Finally, as an example of the style, 9 out of 10. Almost perfect, as perfect an example of a Radler I've ever had. Only bested by classic, true German brewed Radlers. That brings the final score on this one up to 85. This is well above average. This is one to seek. All of these were great beers. This was a really good sampler that they got out for the summer months here this season. I do recommend it. All of the beers in here are classic and great, great summer beers. If you're hot, you're doing yard work, and you still want to drink a beer, you get done and just want to relax and quench that thirst with a beer, any of these would be great to go for. As always, I do appreciate you tuning in. I hope you learned something. I hope you kind of got an idea of some additional beers that are out in the market right now, and maybe that can twist your arm one way or the other, whether you go for it or not. Either way, whatever floats your boat. We do thank you. Please consider liking, subscribing. Share this with a fellow beer connoisseur if you think they'd like the content. We have many, many, many more reviews to come and much more. Multiple videos coming out every week. So if you want to stay in the loop, do be sure to click that bell and subscribe, and you'll know when our videos drop. Thank you as always. We'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep it beer, keep it craft. Cheers.